the very fact that early Puritan discourse was so much embedded in biblical narratives where New Canaan, New Jerusalem, the notion of the settlers as the early settlers as coming out of Europe in a kind of exodus narrative, leaving Egypt into the new Israel, the very fact of America as the promised land, meant the relationship to the biblical and Holy Land as a centerpiece, not simply in relation to the past, but rather in terms of the self-conception of a dominant American culture. And that has meant that for many years the Middle East was distant enough to be functioning as part of the self-identity of mainstream America, to the point that in American popular culture you had on one level this importation, largely via London and Paris, of belly dancers, of little Egypts coming and performing in the Chicago exhibition or in Coney Island or in St. Louis. But at the same time you have another genre of expositions having to do with the Holy Land, for example in upstate New York, where they were kind of pre-Epcot centers or proto-Epcot center spaces that Americans who could not travel at the time to the Holy Land could go and enjoy the notion of the Holy Land, the question of Jerusalem and Christianity as imagined in relation to the Holy Land, but here in the US. But as the US gets more involved in the Middle East, especially in the 70s and in the 80s, the exotic Middle East tends to disappear in some ways, and another Middle East emerges, and that is the Middle East as a threat to everything that America stands for. And even though the history of U.S. relation to Islam, as some of the American founding fathers tended to emphasize that they have no quarrel with the Mohammedans, and even conceive a possibly an American Muslim president, at the very same time when the U.S. gets to be involved in the Middle East, this other discourse, Eurocentric Orientalist discourse about Islam and the Arab world emerges at the same time. So what's happening in terms of ideological or in terms of the narratives of the Middle East is that one has two almost schizophrenic discourses, kind of ambivalent love-hate relationship of the exotic, even a space of our origins, the biblical space, and at the same time that other space that is dominated by underdeveloped, primitive, and fanatic terrorists.